Hello, Brontë-saurs and Eyre-Heads. Coming up on episode 16 of Sundays with Jane Eyre, we'll be talking about Volume 2, Chapter 7 and 8, or Chapters 22 and 23 of the novel, and our co-host will be Dr. Kathleen Hudson, who was our guest co-host for episode 3. Our story so far in under 3 minutes. Young Jane has survived an abusive childhood at the hands of the Reed family and the Lowood school where she was sent for being too rebellious. Her best friend at school, the saintly Helen Burns, dies at a very young age. When she turns 18, Jane is hired to be a governess at Thornfield to educate Mr. Rochester's ward, Adele. Jane is disappointed the house is not haunted, but she does hear a strange laugh coming from the attic. But the housekeeper, Mrs. Fairfax, assures her it is just the servant Grace Poole. Jane meets Mr. Rochester. He falls off his horse. He is fascinated by her watercolor paintings, and they begin to have intimate conversations about their inner lives. Rochester reveals to Jane the story of his involvement with Adele's mother, and then one night a mysterious fire breaks out in his bedroom. Jane rescues Rochester by dousing the fire and him in water. They hold hands in his bedroom. The next day, Jane thinks Grace Poole tried to murder him and can't understand why Rochester allows her to be at Thornfield. Friends of Mr. Rochester come to visit Thornfield for an extended holiday, including Blanche Ingram, whom everyone believes is going to marry Rochester. Jane continues her inner battle over her love for Rochester, finally admitting but also trying to quell her feelings as she watches him interact with the insufferable Blanche. The mysterious Mr. Mason arrives from the West Indies, and an old woman arrives to tell the ladies' fortunes. Jane hears her fortunes, but it turns out it was Rochester in disguise as the old woman all along. What? During the night, Jane is awakened by a cry in the attic, then someone calling for help. Rochester comes for Jane and brings her to the attic, where she finds Mason lying bloody in his bed. Jane assumes that Grace Poole has tried to murder him. She helps Rochester attend to Mason. Then they get him out of the house before any of the others wake up. Rochester and Jane sit in the garden and talk. Jane is summoned back to her childhood home, Gateshead, by her dying Aunt Reed, and learns that her aunt has withheld from Jane a letter from an heir uncle wishing to make her his heir. Mrs. Reed told him that Jane was dead. In Volume 2, Chapters 7 and 8, Jane returns to Thornfield, meets Mr. Rochester. They finally reveal their true feelings for each other. Jane utters the famous line, "I am no bird and no net ensnares me," and there is kissing. Yes, this is a kissing book. You don't want to miss the next exciting episode of Sundays with Jane Eyre from the Rosenbach.